Я з великим задоволенням надаю слово для першого виступу під час нашої другої частини роботи пані Гелені Шульцевій, яка представляє Інститут політичних досліджень Європеум, яка буде говорити про нетрадиційні джерела газу і енергетичну безпеку Європи. Будь ласка, Гелена.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. So my task in this project was to write about non-conventional gas and the future for Europe regarding non-conventional gas. I'm not sure I can really do any certain predictions, but I'm not sure anybody really can. So at least I'll try to explain really what non-conventional gas is and what was the development in the US and what are the perspectives for Europe so far. So non-conventional gas, or sometimes we call it only shale gas, but probably this for the most part means also tight gas and coal bed methane. This is natural gas in forms that we've known about for quite a long time, but these sources were unrecoverable, or it would be very expensive to recover them in the past. Just to explain, shale gas is gas that is hidden in shale formations. Shale being quite funnily described as ancient mud somewhere down there. I don't know, like 2 kilometers underneath the surface of Earth. Tight gas, that's gas that's been hidden in impermeable source rocks, but generally it's a term that's used to the other non-shale, non-conventional gas. And then there's coal bed methane, which is wherever you can dig for coal, you can usually find it. It used to be just vented for, there was no use for it, but that changed with high prices of hydrocarbons. So non-conventional gas, contrary to conventional gas, when you tap it, it doesn't flow. You have to do something else. It's called stimulation treatment. And the most common stimulation treatment is hydraulic fracturing. Here I have a sort of a scheme of how it works. This is actually from National Geographic, which I find really helpful when explaining technical stuff to people who are not that technically educated. Here you can see the long vertical line. That's the standard drilling, and when the innovation comes in is when hitting the darker field, which is the shale. And then they start doing horizontal drilling, which can be also when you go down, it can be something like 2.5 kilometers. In the US and Europe, it has to be deeper, and then you can do further few kilometers to cover more gas. Then what people who try to recover non-conventional gas do, they pump a special mixture of water, salts, some metals, and especially sand. They pump it under very high pressure into the source rock. It cracks. Then part of the water, or it's not really water anymore, this mixture recovers back, it's probably around something like 25%. It's stored somewhere. And it is quite messy, so it has to be treated, and it can be reused, but another water has to be added again. And it causes some sort of concerns regarding the blue level just under surface of Earth on this picture, which is the water we drink. That's one concern. Another concern is methane gas that is released. Basically, when methane gas is the simplest hydrocarbon. It is the major part of natural gas. Whenever you dig for coal, it's released. It's also a byproduct when recovering oil. but it's also I don't know, swamps produce it because it's also created when biological molecules degrade. So it's also created by cattle. It's created by rice fields, for example. Um, so hydraulic fracturing releases methane as well, especially in the phase when the water that's been pumped underground is being released. And there is treatment for that. It's called green completion. It's already mandatory in some states of the U.S. It seems like quite a viable way how to limit the release of methane into the atmosphere. The reason why we care that much about it is that methane gas is a very potent greenhouse gas. Even though even though it is, or when you compare it to CO2, which is probably the most famous or maybe popular greenhouse gas, you need only small amount of methane to create more heat in the atmosphere. So that's a very important thing to care about. So methane leakages are or the reason why scientists think that hydraulic fracturing is a potent source of methane is that the level of methane was declining between 1999 and 2006 when the major production of shale gas started in the US, and since then it's been the levels have been rising again. So that's one thing. Another thing is possible earthquakes. That's been something that's been worrying a lot of environmentalists. Probably it is a threat, maybe not so important as it seemed at the beginning, but just to put it a bit into context, it's similar when you mine for coal. There is a potent threat of earthquakes, and it is similar for hydraulic fracturing. Another thing is water, and not only that the water that you use for hydraulic fracturing is contaminated with different things you don't want to spread back into the environment, but it's also massive amounts of water that are basically needed for hydraulic fracturing. So you cannot really do it without any sort of backup plan. Maybe in the US what they do, they have water storages so that they can accumulate large amounts of water and then they can flush it when they need it. So that's one thing that is very important as well. Another thing is that it's a new method, so nobody really knows what are the long-term effects. In the U.S., you can see pictures of people putting on fire water from their kitchen taps. There are different. Scientists have been looking at the content of various materials that are in the hydraulic fracturing water, and they usually don't get into the water that's for drinking, but it can contain methane because the source rock's been cracked and it flows through the rock, not only through the drills but also through some sort of natural pathways. So that's another important issue. The shale gas revolution, and we really can call it revolution, started around 2006, which was in a way probably coincidence that the techniques got together, but also at that time hydrocarbon prices were generally really high. It started in Dallas by a maverick whose name was I think George Mitchell or something like that. And in the US, it really quite fast became very economically viable, especially in Pennsylvania and some parts of the US. Drills that were drilling for conventional gas and couldn't withdraw much of or any large amounts with this technology can do a lot. But there is an important precondition that there was already a lot of drilling going on. In the US, they have large experience with drilling for gas. They have the drilling sets, which is not always the case in Europe, actually quite the opposite. For the U.S., it had another not unforeseen, but a very nice side effect, which is that American greenhouse gas emissions declined. The reason is that when you burn coal, you release much less CO2 into the atmosphere, as well as other pollutants. So, looking at the track record of US GHG now with cheap gas going into the market, the GHG emissions decline. Another very important effect for at least part of American society is the end of nuclear renaissance. There was talk about another wave of nuclear power plants being built, but that pretty much is that. And there are only a few projects that were already too far to shut down. But this obviously has a potential to influence the decision in other parts of the world as well. So that's it. Here I'm trying just to show what's the marketed production of natural gas in the U.S. You can see that's after 2000 there is sort of a lower bump, and then it goes up. This is basically shale gas revolution. Yeah. I'm just going to come back. In the U.S., it's really such an abundant resource that they now don't really drill for where only they get natural gas. They also do drilling where they withdraw some oil. It's called wet natural gas. So the dry one, the plain one, is not viable enough now. It also quite a interesting look at it is LNG. Before the shale gas revolution, the U.S. was preparing for not having enough natural gas. Now it was building regasifying power plants, which are plants that are designed to treat liquefied natural gas and to really gasify it again. Now they're turning them into those ones that liquefy natural gas, and they're getting ready to export. Yeah, this is just another picture of how natural gas is getting on coal. And these graph is only for generation of electricity, but that's one of the that used to be majority created by coal in the US, and now it's really shifting very fast. On the contrary, in the EU countries, generally in Europe, most of electricity is created by burning coal or lignite. Even counts for especially for countries like Poland, but any other country in the EU and in Europe, pretty much, if they have coal, they're burning coal. And the consumption of natural gas has been declining for obvious reasons that were described also in the other presentations. Natural gas in Europe is really expensive. When it comes to non-conventional gas, the problem is knowing how much there is really, and if it's going to be commercially viable to withdraw it. Here is a picture from 2011. It's probably one of the best surveys of non-conventional gas in Europe. You can see the dark spots in Ukraine and Poland. These are the largest shale gas basins that are projected to be very useful. For the other countries in this respect, meaning Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, it is much bleaker. In Slovakia, Czech Republic, probably none at all or very minor. In Hungary, though I'm not that familiar with that, but I think there are some perspectives. There might be something, but it's nothing major. So this looks really good, but then if you look at the map of the world, the picture gets a little different. In Europe, most companies that are that are drilling or are preparing to drill are large international companies that are very mobile. They don't really, they go where the money is. They don't really care that much about politics, about anything other than revenue. And they're Europe tends to be quite a hard environment for working, since regulations tend to be pretty tough. And there are many reasons to believe that for some of the companies it might be just easier to move somewhere else where they don't have to bother with that many obstacles. Another thing in the US that's different to Europe and is very important is infrastructure. We heard here about the situation of pipelines. In the US, you have the pipelines are basically accessible. If you pay, you can put your gas into the pipelines. In Europe, it doesn't work that way. And that was an important precondition. So that's one obstacle. Another one is the rights for mineral resources. In Europe, it tends to be the state that owns the mineral rights for any given land. In the US, it's different, and it really creates special incentives for people to be willing to, not to be willing, but not to object any drilling. And another thing, a very important issue, is geology. As I said, the technology for withdrawing non-conventional gas was developed in the U.S. for U.S. situation. Geology in Europe is different. The rock tends to contain more clay, which means that it's more sort of flexible, and it's harder to crack. It is generally shale tends to be much deeper, which presents special obstacles for drilling, since the deeper you go, the higher the temperature and the higher the pressure. So the equipment has to be different, has to be more durable. And also, as I already said, there is not enough equipment for drilling in Europe, though it changed already, but like even a few years ago, there were few drilling rigs in Europe at all that would be able to drill something like, or drill so deep. And another important thing is expertise. In various countries across the world, there is long-term expertise. In Europe, it's generally lacking. We have mining history, but not really drilling for gas. Yeah, that's the end of my slideshow. What is really interesting, or lately what's been really interesting, has been the case of Poland. Poland was very enthusiastic about non-conventional gas for obvious political reasons. It was the original projections were very optimistic. Radoslav Sikorski, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, even described Poland, and I think it was in 2010, though I'm not 100% sure, but he projected that it can become the next Norway. As we now see, probably Poland's not becoming the next Norway, because some of the investors have actually withdrawn, partially for the reason of geography being more difficult than they actually, or not geography, geology, more difficult than originally projected. Another reason might be the framework of regulations. First of all, permits in Poland have been issued only for 5 years for exploration, plus 2 years possibility to prolong, which investors are generally unhappy about. Another thing is that Poland is threatening to put very high taxation on non-conventional gas. They don't have, obviously, not many countries, or pretty much not even the U.S. now has legislation that is accustomed to this new source of gas, but still the talks about very high taxation are kind of discouraging potential investors. And another thing that's been planned in Poland is creations of some sort of state consortium that would be it would have a stake in all concessions, so that it should make sure that Poland has its stake in the drilling, or its stake in the revenue, and it's sort of loosely based on the Norwegian model. But obviously Poland is not Norway, and there are fears that it actually might be that people who might be working in such a consortium might be not people who are qualified enough, who understand the business, and it creates extra fear. So so regulation has the potential to scare off a lot of investors, and lately I don't know about any drilling in Poland that would be withdrawing gas that's been financially viable. I guess that's all for me. Thanks.